The National Desk, America's News Now.
The Supreme Court considering what some are calling the biggest free speech case in decades, how it could shake up the social media landscape.
It is not hyperbole to say that this is one of the most dire humanitarian situations in the world.
After the first round of Americans evacuate civil unrest in Haiti, the State Department weighs in on the possibility of more U.S.-sponsored evacuations. Plus, record numbers of people engaging in the new emerging world of sports betting. Just ahead, why one group is calling it a ticking time bomb. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Right now, the Supreme Court hearing arguments on two pivotal cases related to the First Amendment. The first, an appeal from the NRA claiming a New York regulator wrongfully pressured businesses to sever ties with the gun rights group. How much third-party influence is acceptable before crossing the line? The other case pertains to social media. The question the justices are trying to etch away at: how much power does the federal government have over social media posts? It centers around the government's efforts to combat online misinformation that conservatives say amounts to a form of unconstitutional censorship. National correspondent Atrel Nashar has been following the latest there, and she joins us now.
When President Biden took office in January 2021, the COVID death toll in the U.S. had just surpassed 400,000. Part of his administration's pandemic strategy was to fight mis- and disinformation.
Modern technology companies have enabled misinformation to poison our information environment with little accountability to their users.
We are in regular touch with these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team.
Did the government's correspondence with social media companies violate the First Amendment? That question now before the Supreme Court.
The government's not allowed to engage in that kind of censorship. They're also not allowed to outsource that to these social media giants either.
The Biden administration says the decisions to moderate content were ultimately made independently by the platforms in line with existing company policies. And much of that moderation, they say, began before the government's conduct at the center of this case.
There's a problem if the government is engaged in coercion, but if it stays on the persuasion side of the line and all we're talking about is government speech, then there's no state action and there's also no First Amendment problem.
The administration points out there was no retaliation in instances the platforms did not remove the content they found problematic. Some of the justices, including Chief Justice John Roberts, appeared skeptical of the Republican AG's arguments.
Maybe the EPA is trying to coerce the platform about something, and the Army Corps of Engineers is trying to coerce them the other way. I mean, you can't just sort of pick and choose which part of the government you're concerned about.
The court's decision in this case could determine how or if the government can communicate with platforms during the next emergency. For example, if the FBI is concerned about posts by a terrorist group, even if that speech is technically protected by the First Amendment.
What this case, I think, really represents is updating First Amendment law into the digital age.
The court's ruling in this case is expected by early June. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atrel Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
And we've also just learned the Supreme Court has indefinitely extended a block on a Texas law that would let officials arrest migrants suspected of illegally entering the United States. The Biden administration had sued to strike it down. It's one of many legal battles pertaining to the southern border. The CEO of United Airlines speaking out today amid multiple safety incidents with its Boeing aircrafts in recent weeks. Scott Kirby told customers today that the issues, which included one flight in which a wheel fell off and another plane that rolled off the runway, were unrelated. He reiterated that, quote, safety is United's highest priority, and said the company would ramp up training for pilots and maintenance technicians moving forward. Idaho could soon ban the use of public funds for gender transitioning treatments. A bill already passed the House and just needs to be passed in the Republican-controlled Senate before heading to the governor's desk. The restrictions would apply to state employees using work health-related insurance and Medicaid recipients. Lawmakers are expected to vote in the coming days. Donald Trump and several co-defendants are appealing the judge's decision to allow District Attorney Fani Willis to stay on the Georgia election fraud case. Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade resigned after the ruling required either him or Willis to step down to remove the appearance of a conflict of interest. Trump's lawyers argue the ruling did not go far enough. And we are just learning tonight that Trump cannot make bond in his civil fraud case, a separate case. His lawyers have notified the court that he can't find an insurance company to underwrite the $464 million he's on the hook for. The deadline to post that bond is next week. Trump is asking an appeals court to delay posting the bond until his appeal is heard. And if Trump can't pay, his assets could be seized and even sold. New tonight, accusations that Donald Trump is inciting violence for saying a Biden re-election would result in, quote, a bloodbath. Meanwhile, his backers and even some of his critics now say that they're being taken out of context and that they were, in fact, about the auto industry. National correspondent Janae Bowens breaking down the controversy.
Donald Trump is getting heat over comments he made about the auto industry under President Joe Biden.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
The reaction is harsh.
That is dangerous. It's irresponsible, and he should not get away with it.
The same people saying this is out of context have not condemned the other dozens of times he has made comments that prompt political violence.
When you then say, and there will be a bloodbath if I lose, you lose the benefit of the doubt because there's a pattern here that goes back a year.
The former president responded Monday on Truth Social, saying the fake news made a big deal out of the word bloodbath, knowing that it was about our shrinking auto manufacturing business and the fact that they use the same name all the time. They are so bad.
Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think they're often taken out of context, but you have a situation here where I don't think he cares that much. I think he believes he's impervious to these kinds of attacks. And to say that he meant literally bloodbaths, I think is a step too far.
Trump also posted a video of journalists and commentators using the word.
Not only is it going to be a bloodbath.
On Sunday, former Vice President Mike Pence rebuked his former boss for calling people arrested in connection to January 6th hostages. He's not endorsing Trump for president. Even still, Pence defended the controversial comments.
The president was clearly talking about the impact of imports devastating the American automotive industry.
Was that clear to you? Because it was a little muddled.
It was.
Now, it's common for both Republicans and Democrats to take their opponents' words out of context. But many experts say in this case, Trump's critics are missing the mark. Amira?
And Janae, what do we know about what people think? How does the public view the former president's rhetoric here?
Right. So I found a CBS YouGov poll from January about the former president's description of immigrants as, quote, poisoning the blood. Now, nearly half of all voters agreed with Trump's statement, with more than 70% of Republicans agreeing. Amira?
Really interesting. All right, Janae Bowens live in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Florida police tonight searching for suspects after 3 shootings in Jacksonville Beach on St. Patrick's Day. At least one person we know of has died, has been killed, and several others were injured. Police put a shelter-in-place order last night. It has since been lifted, and the shootings, of course, are under investigation. It is the last day of winter, but the Northwest is experiencing above-average warmth. Many of those temperatures were forecast to threaten daily record highs today. Portland, Oregon was forecast to hit 75 degrees above the record of 71. And Spokane, Washington was forecast to reach 68 degrees, tying the record. The high temperatures will continue through tomorrow. A ban on asbestos in the U.S. The EPA today announcing the carcinogen used in certain types of car brakes and chlorine bleach will no longer get a pass by the regulatory agency. The action marks a major milestone for chemical safety after more than 3 decades of loose protections. Asbestos is known to cause cancer and has been linked to 40,000 deaths per year in the United States. A team of Israeli officials now planning a trip to Washington as a rift widens between President Biden and Israel's Netanyahu. The United States now warning Israel against a planned operation into Gaza's Rafah. Israel says it needs to continue rooting out Hamas militants while looking for hostages. But tonight, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan calling the operation a grave mistake.
It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza, and further isolate Israel internationally.
The remarks from Sullivan come as we learn Biden and Netanyahu held their first known conversation in more than a month. This as Israeli negotiators arrive in Qatar to participate in a new round of in-person talks for a 6-week pause in fighting that would help mitigate a hunger crisis that is quickly escalating into a famine. Experts now say they anticipate a steep rise in malnutrition-related deaths in children in Gaza, with especially dire consequences and circumstances for 300,000 people in the northern part of the territory. 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 in that exact area are acutely malnourished. And coming up, a small percentage of migrants scheduled to be evicted from Chicago actually left. Just ahead, we'll dig into why. Then the first ever over-the-counter contraception pill officially hits the market, where it's selling today. And it is March Madness as more people than ever now legally bet on basketball games. Just ahead, why some are concerned the entertaining habit is producing some troubling realities.
This is a fluid and quickly evolving situation on the ground. We are continually staying in touch with American citizens.
Tonight, the State Department considering more emergency evacuations of Americans out of Haiti as gang violence and political instability escalates. A government-chartered flight carrying more than 30 U.S. citizens departed the country yesterday as the main airport in Port-au-Prince remains closed due to the violence. 34 migrants were scheduled to be evicted from shelters in Chicago yesterday, but only 3 left. The city said most of them had applied for newly announced exemptions to the 60-day limit on migrant stays. The exemptions apply to families with children as well as sick or pregnant migrants. And tonight, an alarming claim by an undocumented migrant arrested earlier this month in Texas. He reportedly told authorities he had trained with the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah and was trying to come to the United States to cause harm. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with the details.
Top intelligence officials cite the elevated flow of migrants to our southern border as helping to create a landscape criminals and terrorists can exploit, with a disturbing incident now added to a growing list of them. 22-year-old Basil Bassel Ibadi from Lebanon, arrested earlier this month in El Paso, Texas, reportedly claimed he's a member of Hezbollah, hoping to make a bomb, and his destination was New York, according to the New York Post. An alarming episode, but one that supports a warning given just last week by FBI Director Christopher Wray.
There are a whole host of threats that emanate from the border.
Those threats laid out in an astonishing rise of those on the terror watch list who have been apprehended at our border, from 0 in 2019 to 15 in 2021 to 169 last year, and already at least 58 this year. Though Wray says this is not the biggest concern.
The national security ramifications of the issues at the border are better reflected in some ways more by what we don't know about the people who snuck in, provided fake documents.
Also in El Paso, authorities just posted this video of two fugitives wanted for homicide in Dallas being arrested by border agents, a job some say has been made far more difficult by current border policy.
We see the pull factors, the fact that if you make it to the border, you can likely stay for the rest of your natural life, is an enormous magnet for people to come.
Democrats argue a solution already exists to secure the southern border, and it's Republicans who are standing in the way.
It's obvious that they're not looking for a solution. They just want to have something to complain about for the next election.
An election being shaped by more and more incidents threatening the safety and security of Americans. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting. The Biden administration is focusing on advancing women's health issues and studies. The president signing an executive order today aiming to properly track women's illness data and provide better funding opportunities for medical research. She and First Lady Jill Biden made the announcement during a Women's History Month reception. Included in that initiative is a new menopause treatment effort launched by the National Institutes of Health. And online sales went live just this morning for the first ever over-the-counter birth control pill. It's available only online right now at Amazon or opill.com, but it's also being shipped to drugstores across the country. It's been applauded as a boost in accessibility to contraception. Opill is a progestin-only drug, often called a mini pill, which is known to have fewer side effects than the more popular combination pills that have estrogen. And you can expect to pay $20 for a 1-month supply. Joann Fabrics and Crafts has filed for bankruptcy in the face of customers cutting down on discretionary spending. Joann's revenue has been decreasing in recent years. The Ohio-based company says it has secured $132 million in fresh funding to help cut its debt in half. Its stores and website will stay open for business. Well, this is the National Desk America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
What would Shirley Lita do if this free health screening never happened?
Probably be sitting at home wondering if I'm okay.
A chance to test hearing, prostate cancer, and breast health, among others.
And to have them available for free, I wish it was like this more often.
All because of Hop into Health, a fun community event with life-saving health screenings, the first of its kind at Onslow Memorial Hospital.
We're cutting out some of the extra travel that our community would have to do, and we're bringing all these resources to you.
MD Daryl Ross highlighted lung health as a key area deserving more attention.
If you do your best to take care of your lungs, then you're functional all throughout your life.
And he says no one should pass up this free opportunity.
We've seen a lot of things change over the time that we've lived there.
Elena Doge started living in her Merle Drive home about 6 years ago and now lives there with her partner. Doge says they were once familiar with the homeless population and would try to help them with whatever they needed. But the makeup of the neighborhood has progressively transformed throughout the years.
You know, if we saw somebody walking down the street, we would wait to leave the house. When our vehicles are in our driveway, we leave them unlocked with nothing in them. Because of, prior break-ins to our vehicles. We have a separate back room that we've found people, sleeping in.
On the morning of March 7th, however, Doge came home to a naked intruder smoking drugs in her living room. This has become the norm in the neighborhood.
Probably 4 or 5 times in the middle of the night.
gotten woken up to somebody in my backyard. Multiple times, people try to kick the door in to the property, to my shed.
I understand that there are local resources that are trying to, do some outreach, but I also think that there should be some accountability for what happens when those folks get to go home. We live here. We're left with all the effects of that and the people that linger.
Inside the shadows on the Wolf Clubhouse in Shiocton, about a dozen people are coming together with what they call a common purpose.
We just want to sit down and have an organizational meeting with the law enforcement so that everyone's on the same page.
Don Milkey is the coordinator of the 2024 Sturgeon Guard. Milkey says more volunteers are always needed. He says guards will be able to cover popular sturgeon viewing places like the Wolf River's Bamboo Bend in Shiocton and some of the more remote areas too. He says guard members will have vests, hats, and cell phones. DNR Warden Supervisor Lieutenant Chris Shea says the volunteer effort has an impact.
It's a great tool for us. It really allows them to help be our eyes and ears, allow us to perform a lot of our other job duties that we need to do, be out there on the water, on the lake.
Coming up, March Madness is here and more people are betting on sports, but there is a dark side to all the fun. We'll investigate right after this. March Madness is here, and along with all the excitement, a record number of people are gambling on the games. With all that betting and the exploding popularity of sports betting apps, experts are seeing a big spike in the risk for problem gambling. Spotlight on America national investigative correspondent Angie Moreski looks at why one expert calls it a ticking time bomb for society.
From casinos,
this is Powerball,
to lotteries, to horse racing, Americans have long chased the odds of winning on a wager.
Winner, chicken dinner.
Winner, chicken dinner. But going after that winner's high,
BetMGM is for everyone that loves sports betting.
Has gone into overdrive since a Supreme Court decision in 2018 made it possible for states to legalize sports betting.
What we're seeing since 2018 is the largest and fastest expansion of gambling in our nation's history.
National Council on Problem Gambling Executive Director Keith White says that Supreme Court decision opened the gambling floodgates. 38 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized sports betting in the last 6 years.
I'm having a good time.
Washington, D.C. resident Raphael Haskell comes to the Caesars Sportsbook next to Capital One Arena every day. Are you losing or winning?
Well, I'm half and half.
The biggest driver of the most recent gambling surge are sports betting apps.
Bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets.
With enticing deals to attract new bettors, especially young men, the fastest growing demographic of gamblers like Chris Niebuhr. How old are you?
25.
Wait, okay, so you're right in the demographic.
I'm exactly who they're marketing to.
With their popularity, sports betting apps are also contributing to an estimated 30% increase in the risk for problem gambling over the past several years. Are these sports betting apps a game changer in gambling?
I think they are a game changer. It can make it so easy to get into trouble.
With the help of lightning-fast analysis through artificial intelligence, the sports betting apps offer seemingly endless propositions. And you're not just betting on the outcome of a game anymore. They have what are called micro bets on any little action in the game. Will they make that free throw? How about that first down? And it's just so easy to keep betting with just a tap on your phone. The National Council on Problem Gambling estimates 3 to 4% of the population has a gambling addiction, about 9 million Americans. And White says it often ends up hurting not just the individual, but also families, communities, and businesses.
Roughly 70% of people with severe problems report that they've committed a white-collar crime to finance their gambling.
He calls it a public health crisis and says with all the money being made comes a responsibility to minimize harm.
We need to work with every single segment of society to have a public health response just like we did with alcohol and with opioids. Gambling needs to be in that same conversation.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
Coming up, DC's cherry blossoms have reached peak bloom. What's unusual about them this year? We'll be right back. The iconic pink and white blossoms that transform Washington, D.C. at the beginning of spring every year, they have officially hit their earliest peak bloom recorded in 20 years. Usually they don't emerge until the end of March, but they hit peak bloom yesterday, and experts say they will likely keep shifting earlier and earlier in future years. Scientists say it has a lot to do with the weather, pointing to rising global temperatures. So if you had plans to check out the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C., well, book that trip sooner rather than later. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.